Hello and welcome to another episode of Trash to Track. Now in this episode I'm going to be looking at this Lima Western that's been sent in by Keith. Now this Western's been repainted and detailed to a very high standard. He wants me to fit these ultra scale wheels and a CD motor replacement. The chassis and body shell are loose in the box, but this, for a Lima product, this model really does look quite nice. It's been painted up into the desert sand, the ochre livery, sorry. Bit of oil on the side there, but I don't think that looks too bad at all really. It's very, very nicely done. Full buffer bean cows, pipes on the ends. So I'll be stripping this down and installing a CD replacement motor drive from Strathpether Junction. I've also got to add pickups to this dummy bogie because it only picks up from one side, which isn't the best, so I'm going to add pickups to all of those wheels. Now to remove the bogie frame on a Lima diesel, undo the screws from the bogie frame and the motor will lift out from the top. So these screws were really tight. They were really tight in the plastic frames. So when I carefully undone the screws, I'll just hold it in place there. I don't know why they were so tight. Some of these models you get from Lima, the screws are really tight in, others are quite loose, but this one was really tight. But eventually we get there, and then you can lift the motor bogie up out through the top, and that is stripped. That is this pretty much stripped down. I did notice the chassis frame was broke, so we're going to have to repair that later with some 2-part epoxy resin. And the weight is actually stuck in there. I think it's stuck in with black tack. But here's the replacement motor kit, the 9mm kit we're going to use from Strathpether, which I ordered from eBay. I'm also, like I said, going to strip this down. And we're going to start with the ultra scale wheels. Now I've got my wheel gauge here, just making sure the back-to-backs are correct. This is for the dummy bogie. The drive bogie, they're still in the bag. Just testing that motor to make sure it runs, because it does run. Runs quite nicely, because I'll keep all the spare bits I don't use in my spares box. But if it doesn't run, there's no point in keeping them. But it does run. So to snip that wire off there, because I'm going to need that off anyway. So I'm going to strip the motor down by taking the motor faceplate off by removing these 2 screws. Now to fit a CD drive you need to take all this off and the magnet out of the ring-filled motor. Otherwise it won't fit. You do need the screws though to reattach the new motor plate, so keep the screws handy. I should get myself a bigger flat-bladed screwdriver really. This micro one doesn't always work the best. So the actual commutator is quite dirty on this model, but there's the armature. So another good thing about Lima is the armature and pinion gear all come away as one. So I'm going to clean this up, ready to, and then like I said, I'm going to put it in my spares. But this was covered in thick black carbony oil. It was surprising this ran at all really. It was really dirty. You can see there on the cotton bud. But I'm going to clean it all up before putting them into storage, so if I ever use them in the future, they're ready to go. To remove the wheels, I use this wheel puller on the insulated side of the axle. It clamps around the wheel, then you screw it when you can line it up properly. When you line it up, you screw that top bit down and it pushes the axle away from the wheel. And the wheel will just pull away. There we go. And I also removed that pickup brass from underneath there and give that a thorough cleaning on the drive bogie. And there's the wheel. So I've removed all the wheels and cleaned up the motor casing thoroughly. The new motor slots in there, and the 3D printed mount will screw into where the brush retainers used to sit. I'm going to just strip the back down and clean all this off as well. Remove the retaining piece there, and then all the gears can come out. These were coated in a horrible film of black grease as well. You can see how greasy it is because it's shining in the light there. This was all cleaned off, cotton bud and meths, or a cotton bud and contact cleaner. And I thoroughly cleaned the motor housing Look at it, it's horrible. It's all, I don't know what it is, but it's all over this side of the motor. So I put it on some cloth and give it a spray with the contact cleaner just to thoroughly clean it all. And make sure everything's nice and clean, ready for reassembly. So that's it, that's all the gears been cleaned, and this face plate or retaining plate here took some cleaning, but we got there in the end. I'm also now going to replace some of the lubrication with some Labelle 106 grease on the gear spindles, so that when the motor's reassembled and it is correctly lubricated. The smaller of the gears goes on the bottom, larger on the top. The larger gears have a smaller gear cast into them. This faces downwards and engages with the gears that drive the wheels. Once they're all in place, I replace that retaining piece, which is a spring fit, not like the Hornby one what's clipped in. This is put on the gear spindles and then is held in place with that plastic lug. And the gears are spinning nicely. So that's all nice and cleaned up now. We can now put the new motor in it. Forgot, turned it upside down, let the gear fell off because the wheels aren't in it to hold the gears in at the moment. But one thing with these kits, you have to trim the pinion gear down. The pinion gear supplied is far too long. So I just cut mine with a scalpel. Trim it down, trial fit, trim it down, trial fit. Now, you have to remove about 2/3 of the printed gear on this Lima model to get it to fit. And once it's trimmed down, making sure it's square, it's a simple push fit onto the motor shaft. Don't push it on too far. You need a gap behind the gear and the motor, otherwise it won't spin properly. And here I push it on with some pliers and then push it too far. So now I've got to try and lever it out a little bit, because I didn't do what I was saying and I went a bit too far. But just using a blunt scalpel blade, just pulled it forward a little bit. Now that should engage with those gear train. So I put that in there. Everything looks to be okay. It's spinning the motor with the gears. They're very free running, these CD motors. And the battery test, and you can see there it's spinning all the gears. So everything's seated correctly and is running as it should. So you can see there just how small that gear is that I've cut compared to the other spare one. So yeah, cut about 2/3 of that gear off. Otherwise it's just not going to fit in that Lima motor casing. So that can now be put back in and secured with the 2 screws we took out earlier on. Do not over tighten these screws. If you try and over tighten them, you'll end up cracking the 3D printed motor mount, and you'll have to buy another kit then. So just put these in just so they're tight enough to hold it in place. Do not over tighten the screws when you do this. So that's the motor upgraded. Fully upgraded. It's we'll do the wheels next, and the wheels for the drive bogie were all separate, so I had to put the axles in one side, and these were very tight, so I just with some force pushed them down onto there till the axle comes flush with the wheel face. And then one of the geared wheels is selected, and then the wheels are put through the chassis, or the motor chassis, motor housing chassis should I say, and then the geared wheel is pushed on, and then the back-to-back's checked with that gauge we used earlier. It's a very tight fit, these wheels onto the axles. So I did all 6 wheels for the drive bogie. The middle wheels are obviously floating, they don't provide any drive at all, so make sure you don't accidentally put the geared wheel on the middle axle. Here I pushed it on a bit too far, so I had to try and push the axle back, which I couldn't do, so I got this wheel puller again just to pull that wheel back slightly, because I'd pushed it on a bit too far and the axle was actually standing proud of the wheel face. But once all 6 axles are done, or 3 axles are done on the motor, they're all done. The back-to-backs have been checked with the gauge, I'm now going to look at the dummy bogie. Now you strip this down and do the clip, and everything falls out because there's a spring in here holding it all tense. So you drop that out. These wheels again will go into the spares bin. The bogie frame itself was quite dusty, so I gave this a dust down with the paintbrush to remove the dust and dirt. And the one thing you also have to do on this bogie is on the sides of the bogie there are some plastic lugs that stick proud, that they stand proud of the bogie behind the wheels. These were so big on the ultra scale wheels that actually stopped them from turning. They basically clipped into place. So these lugs were cut off with a sharp scalpel blade. And then some pickups were made with some phosphor bronze strip and a piece of brass. And here you can see I've screwed them to the bogie side frames. I lost the footage of me making those. But it's going to pick up from 4 axles. And I did put it back together how Lima had it, but we had a problem in the fact that it sat and it was okay when it had weight applied. But when you lifted it up, the wheels had too much play and the pickups fell out from behind the wheels. So I'm going to remove this brass piece that Lima had to hold the axles in place. And once that's done, with a bit of weight on top of it, this white metal cylinder block, I'm going to test the connectivity. So picking up one rail, I push the pickup away from one side of the wheel, which proves it's picking up from the other. And then again, that proves it's picking up from the left-hand wheel. And then I tested them on the other side to make sure that all 4 pickups were making good contact with the wheel backs. And then I got rid of the retaining piece that Lima provided. And I actually glued in some plasticard strips to hold the axles in place. Now there's very little play in those. They won't fall down when the bogey's lifted up, and they will stay in contact with the pickups. And I've also added some wires, and we're about ready to wire this up. So again, now I've done all that work, I'm just testing the pickups again. It's better to be safe than sorry. I don't want to wire it all up only for it not to work. And the bleep noise you can hear proves that it's making good electrical conductivity all through the bogie pickup, and even the pickup I added to the motor bogie on one side there, just to help it run a little bit better. If this was mine and it was DCT fitted, I would fit a stay alive capacitor to it as well, so that I mean, you'll see at the end how nicely it runs, but if it was digital and a stay alive, it'd run even better. So I'm thoroughly testing the pickups, and now that that's all done, I screwed the bogie frame back on the bogie. Now this was erroneous. You shouldn't do this because I hadn't put it back through the chassis frame, so I had to take this off again to put the motor bogie back in the chassis. So I don't know why I left this footage in, but it just proves that we all make mistakes sometimes. The only other thing I did to the chassis was drilled 2 holes either side of the bogie retaining pin to pass the new pickup wires through. There's a washer on that plastic. I used a plastic nut and bolt to insulate, for no short circuits. And I put a washer on there just to space it out so it's the correct ride height. Wires were fed through the chassis, and then the bogie is held in place with that plastic nut and bolt. And with that one washer, it is the correct ride height. So I've put the trailing bogie in now and threaded the wires through. Just making sure the wires ain't going to be too tight, because the bogie will need to pivot correctly. If the wires are too tight, it will stop it turning. And then I'm going to secure the bogie in place with another washer and the plastic nut that came with it. And there we go, I've done that there. So that's all in place, and the bogie is pivoting as it should. So I'm just going to move these wires. These will need tidying up shortly with a bit of black tack on the weight. And now I'm going to refit the motor, having removed the bogie frame again. I don't know why I put that on when it was outside the chassis. I'm not sure why. I had to remove it, and then I'm going to put it back on now. And that will secure the motor bogie in place in the chassis. Just holding it upside down there, replacing the screws. And again, don't over tighten them. Lima plastic is quite flexible, so if you over tighten it, you run the risk of bending the bogie frames out of shape. So once that was all back in place, again, it was back to testing. Now there is no positive and negative terminal that I could tell on the CD replacement motor, just a red and black wire. So I wired it up how I thought it should go, tested it on the track with the battery, and I always carry a non-modified DC loco with me, a little Smoky Joe, to test polarity on things like this, and it ran the same direction, so I've wired that up correctly. I'm not very pleased with how it's trying to run on here. I don't know whether the track's dirty or there's some grease on the wheels, but at this point it wasn't the greatest of runners. And I've got a feeling it's the battery. I've got a supermarket own brand one. I usually use Duracell, so I think I'm going to go back to using a Duracell battery. But it did struggle here, and I was a bit worried that this model wasn't going to run correctly. But as you'll see in a minute, it must have been the battery. But now I know that the polarity is correct, I'm just going to desolder that wire quickly and add a small amount of heat shrink tubing onto it. Then I'm going to link the wires back together, heat shrink the joins, and there we are, it's fully wired up. So with a small amount of black tack on the chassis weight, and that I thought I'd glued that with resin, but I think this is the time I glued it with super glue, and just putting a little bit of pressure on it broke it again. So it was out with the epoxy resin this time, and I will show you in a second. When that epoxy resin dried, that chassis was very, very strong. The only other thing I did was added a couple of 10-gram weights to the non-driving end, just to give those ultra scale wheels the best possible chance of pickup. And I've also let that glue settle, and now it, like I said, very, very strong. This is the next day. So now it's time to put the body shell back on, and we'll give it a third test. Now, the body shell is not the easiest thing to get on, because the guys modified this with full front end buffer beams. It's not just an easy clip fit. You have to like bend the chassis in the middle to get both ends in. And this took a while, because you'd get one end in and then the other one would pop out. But we got there eventually with the aid of some toothpicks. And this Western is now looking. Now if you look, this is with a controller, not that dud battery. It's running lovely. And that CD replacement motor has lifted this model to new heights. For a Lima Western, this really isn't too bad at all. And it is an easy conversion, I hope you'll agree. It's even easier when you haven't got to put ultra scale wheels in it. But the guy who did this has done a very, very good job. The paint job is fantastic. The detail works really nice. And in fact, it really does stand out. When I took this to Trains for You and ran it around their test layout, some people in the shop actually thought it was a Dapper Western running around from a distance, which proves how nice this model actually looks in real life. Thank you so much again for watching Trash to Track. Now, if you've got anything you'd like to see repaired or featured on the channel, please email me at dansmodelrailways@gmail.com. Have a look and get it sent over, and who knows, it may even feature in an episode all of its own. So that's it now for this rebuild. You can see the Keith's Western running around Trains for You's test layout. As is the norm, I've edited the background noise out because the shop's always busy, so there's a lot of background chatter. Unfortunately, I couldn't hook it up to any rolling stock because the wire couplings that were on the model wouldn't allow it on this test layout. But here it is running light engine, and I think you'll agree it looks and runs absolutely fantastic. So thanks again for watching Trash to Track. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now.